Medieval history has recorded bizarre and morbid things, but the most terrifying is the animalistic brutality of those who ruled the world. Behind the crown lay distorted homosexual desires hidden by official records. These 11 kings used their power to rape, torture, and drive men to their deaths, turning the court into a hell of filthy sexual games. There, love did not exist, only imprisonment and slaughter. This horrifying truth will expose the entire disgusting dark side hidden behind the splendor of the throne. Number 11. William II Rufus, the cruel English king who tortured young male courtiers in sick desires. William II Rufus, the famous King of England, is remembered as a tough ruler who held onto the throne after succession turmoil, expanded royal power, suppressed rebellious nobles, and turned the court into a machine run on fear. 8 seconds. In 1095, Winchester was no longer the magnificent capital sung about in praises. It was a dark wooden palace, heavy with the smell of sweat, animal hides, and blood from the hunt that hadn't even dried yet. On May 8th, William II Rufus emerged from the deep forest after a failed hunting day, his fur cloak dark red and stained with deer blood, exuding a chilling authority that made the whole court hold its breath. When his anger flared, everything around him became a sacrifice, without needing any reason. Robert Fitzsimons, a young, talented courtier with a sweet voice and eyes bright as stars. He was a loyal noble, but he stood in the wrong place at the wrong time. Just one look that didn't please the king. One slow step was enough to turn into a crime. William Rufus ordered Robert dragged to the dungeon. 3 days passed in pitch-black darkness, where mold clung to the skin, and the guy was only thrown scraps of hard, moldy bread, just enough to barely stay alive. On the 4th day, Robert was released when his will had been worn down. He was fed seafood porridge, bathed, thinking the king had seen his loyal heart. He had no idea another nightmare was waiting. The door to the king's private chamber quickly closed behind him. No ceremonies between lord and subject, just raw power. William Rufus pulled Robert in, tore open his rough linen shirt. That thin fabric couldn't protect a courtier's dignity in front of the king. Fear coiled up in the sealed room, thick enough to choke. The king didn't just want submission, he wanted absolute control. The leather whip lashed down on Robert's back, each strike heavy. Then the dry smack of flesh against flesh echoed in the narrow space, mixed with ragged breaths and terror. The torment was wrapped in a layer of twisted desire, where power and pleasure blended into a poison that killed loyalty. And it didn't stop there. Threats hung over Robert's head like a cold blade. His family, his lineage, all could vanish with just a nod. In that moment, Robert's body no longer belonged to him. It became a trophy for a king drunk on power, someone who used the throne as a tool to satisfy his darkest urges. After that night, Robert Fitzsimons was no longer the same man. The court still met. Men in tight-fitting armor packed the great hall, mouths talking about war, taxes, and loyalty. Robert was there too, in a shambling, haggard appearance. And William Rufus laughed loud, his booming voice echoing off the wooden ceiling. As if nothing had happened, under that gleaming armor, the filthy secrets were buried deep, spreading in silence. A few weeks later, news of Robert's death was reported to the king like a minor incident. They said he hanged himself in his room, leaving no final words. No one investigated, no one dared show pity. That death passed like a thin wisp of smoke, vanishing amid hunting feasts and heavy scented wine. William Rufus kept ruling, kept hunting, kept using fear as reins to control people. In the years that followed, similar stories kept leaking out from Winchester's stone walls. Everyone saw William Rufus never married, left no heir, and spent too much time with male courtiers. The seemingly scattered pieces, when put together, formed a grim picture of a tyrannical homosexual king who used violence to oppress male courtiers to satisfy his desires. By 1100, when William Rufus fell in a hunting accident with dozens of arrows in him, the court was shaken, but no one truly mourned. Death came in agony, just like how he once sowed terror in others. What happened in Winchester's sealed rooms was never officially recorded, but its echoes still haunted the courtiers and families of the unfortunate victims. Number 10. Philip II Augustus, the French king who imprisoned his beloved knight in mad jealousy. Philip II Augustus was the king who strengthened France, expanded territory, weakened English power, and turned the Paris court into a power center that made Europe wary. 8 seconds. But from 1187, Paris no longer had the glamorous look from the odes. Along the cold Seine banks, the stone palace loomed heavy like a mountain crushing people's fates. War with England dragged on, the court tense as a bowstring. But Philip II Augustus still walked the Great Hall calmly, his blue silk robe embroidered with gold fluttering, eyes cold as steel. He could stay upbeat not because of good news from the battlefield, but because of nights of pleasure with men. In September 1188, Bertrand de Saissac, a knight with a stable family, got sucked into that whirlwind of the king's affections. It was his first day stepping into the Great Hall, joining the guard detail in the main chamber where the king discussed with ministers. He felt proud. Chest puffed out in a bold stance. 3 seconds. Unaware that after the hall doors closed, his life would veer off course. Bertrand caught Philip's eye the moment they passed each other. Bertrand's passionate demeanor made Philip infatuated like first love. The problem was, Bertrand had a wife, and the king's jealousy exploded fiercely upon hearing that. In one night, Bertrand was yanked from his usual guard quarters, stripped of all choices. He was locked in a freezing stone tower, clean but no different from Rapunzel's. His feet chained with iron, every move dragging metal scraping against stone in a chilling sound. No trial, not even a reason. The king's power enough to turn a knight into a prisoner. The nights after, the tower's darkness was no longer quiet. Philip II came, bringing the strong smell of wine and heavy breaths. 4 seconds. The king's desires weren't hidden at all. Bertrand was forced to abandon wife and kids, forsake honor, to survive in a relationship where power decided everything. Each resistance only tightened the chains, fear spreading down his spine. In that sealed, high-walled space, Bertrand became property, skin marked with bruises, humiliation clinging to his spirit. Each day passed. The night grew more depleted, like a faint shadow in the stone tower. Philip II didn't just want the body. He wanted total dependence, control over every breath. Only when he stopped resisting did the king reluctantly take him along as an attendant. In feasts that dragged late into the night, stone floors stained with red wine spills. 3 seconds. Men in tight goat leather pants gathered around the king, laughing loudly as if no moral boundaries existed. In that stifling air, desires were bared raw. Philip hosted orgiastic parties but touched no one else but Bertrand. You could say he showered him with utmost favor. The issue was his jealousy growing more insane. He wouldn't tolerate any other gaze on Bertrand, even from blood kin. Bertrand's brother, brought into the guard ranks after Bertrand became the king's favorite, was seen as a rival shadow in that sick jealousy. The brother simply greeted his sibling in an empty palace hallway, and that got him coldly eliminated by the king. No reason, no explanation. The young innocent's life traded for the throne-sitter's peace of mind. Word spread. No one dared mention that name again. 3 seconds, let alone approach Bertrand. After his brother's death, Bertrand de Saissac gradually vanished from palace records. He was no longer seen by the king's side, and no one dared ask his whereabouts. Only scattered stories floated through stone corridors that he fell gravely ill from his brother's death and died weeks later. Philip II Augustus had once favored Bertrand immensely, but when he died, the king showed no regret. The king kept ruling, kept warring, kept expanding territory. Outwardly an outstanding monarch, inwardly a man blinded by desire. In the years after, the Paris court stayed lit. Parties went on endlessly, and behind thick stone walls, the shadows of homosexual relationships never vanished. Victims never stopped at Bertrand, and the king's twisted sexual desires seeped into every command. 3 seconds, leaving deep wounds on the fates of those with no choice. Number 9. Al-Hakam II, the Cordoba caliph who indulged in debauchery with a harem of young male slaves in the palace. Al-Hakam II was the illustrious caliph of Cordoba, famous for a stable reign, the world's grandest Islamic library, and governing a kingdom that made the West respectful and fearful. In 970, Cordoba wasn't just a center of learning and power, but a place where unspeakable secrets were buried deep behind shining stone walls. The Alhambra Palace stood splendid with fragrant gardens, pools reflecting sparkling southern sunlight. But inside that glamour was a heavy atmosphere where desire and power twisted tight. Al-Hakam II appeared in a white silk robe embroidered with gold thread. 3 seconds, calm demeanor, deep voice, and eyes of a calculating man. Worry about an heir weighed on the court, but instead of solutions, the king sank into private urges. In that palace, a male harem existed quietly, shielded by strict rituals and laws. Ziryab, a young musician captured from Baghdad's slave market, was brought to Cordoba like a rare item. His musical talent kept him in the palace, but it also turned him into prey. Ziryab was one of the king's first favorites. Locked in a private room covered in silk pillows, thick incense hard to breathe. Day by day, lute sounds echoed in the sealed space, mixed with fear and dependence. Gradually, those sounds lost purity, blending with moans and heavy breaths. 8 seconds. Al-Hakam II controlled everything around Ziryab. Slave status allowed no refusal. Each performance became mental torture. Art twisted into a satisfaction tool. The king often used scented oils mixed with strange herbs, making Ziryab dazed during encounters, losing sense of time and self. In long nights, flickering oil lamps cast shadows of 2 on walls, creating haunting scenes till dawn. Over time, Ziryab changed, obviously. Eyes lost focus, lute playing disjointed, hands trembling like not his own. Other servants noticed the instability, but no one spoke. As similar chaos spread in court, male courtiers the king promoted, daily in loose robes, gathered. 3 seconds, wine overflowing cups, laughter echoing, covering shady relations with young servers, regardless of gender. When news started leaking beyond palace walls, Al-Hakam II grew vigilant. Power allowed no cracks. Ziryab, now fully broken, no longer entertaining and a potential risk. The king ordered all traces sealed, and the young musician's fate decided in silence. One moonless night, Ziryab vanished from the palace. His end, everyone understood implicitly, and no one mentioned his name again. After, Cordoba court ran smooth. Al-Hakam II kept sponsoring scholars, expanding the library, consolidating power. Outwardly, a brilliant reign. Inside, cracked everywhere. 3 seconds. Stories like Ziryab repeated hundreds of times in just 5 years of rule. When Al-Hakam II died in 976, people remembered him as a learned caliph. But in Alhambra's shadows, what happened with his male favorites lingered like a distinctive scented oil that couldn't fade. Number 8. Peter I, the Portuguese king seeking male substitutes after his lover. Inés's tragedy. Peter I of Portugal was the king famous for tough decisions, brutally punishing political enemies, and leaving a deep mark in history with shocking court actions. Right from 1354 to 1355, the Coimbra Palace by the Mondego River no longer looked peaceful. Civil war simmered. Tensions between Peter, then Crown Prince, and his father, King Afonso IV, grew tight. And above all was Inés de Castro's death, Peter's lover brutally killed by Afonso. 3 seconds. That tragedy tore Peter's mind like a knife, pushing him into a dark orbit. After Inés's death, Peter changed clearly. From a calm man, he became unstable, hot-tempered, and started seeking comfort in twisted ways. The prince gradually shunned women to avoid repeating what happened with lover Inés. He turned to male courtiers, always within power's reach. João Fernandes, a young knight from the opposition, became the first victim in that chain of events. Captured in a secret purge, João was dragged to the palace. No trial, no defense allowed. He was locked in a damp wine cellar, where moldy wooden barrels stacked high. Old wine smell mixed with humidity rising, stifling. Iron chains tightened wrists and ankles, each move echoing cold metal in darkness. Peter I turned grief over Inés into sick sexual tastes. 3 seconds / greater than. The obsession made Peter I increasingly out of control. When João tried to escape, rage exploded like fire on oil. João's family outside the palace became retaliation targets. Silent deaths happened, hidden under political punishment veils. When João heard his family massacred, he couldn't bear it and followed them. Fear spread wide, turning Coimbra Palace into a place where every step felt heavy. By 1357, when Peter officially became king, those cruel acts weren't mentioned in history books. João Fernandes vanished from royal records. Manuel no longer in any slave papers. Same with over a dozen other male favorites. What happened in wine cellars or feast halls was buried with victims. Only whispers in folklore. The court entered a new phase, but shadows from past years clung. Peter I kept ruling with a brutal reputation, ready to punish enemies without mercy. He no longer used men as Inés substitutes, but Inés de Castro's tragedy echo remained, when desire twisted by power created a long crime chain. Number 7. Magnus IV Eriksson, the Swedish king who imprisoned a duke in possessive jealousy. Magnus IV Eriksson was the king who unified Sweden and Norway, reformed laws, expanded royal influence, and left a big mark in medieval Nordic history. In 1350, Stockholm's winter dragged cold to numbness. The stone palace by Lake Mälaren sank in fog and ice, reflecting Magnus IV Eriksson's mood. Court cracked. Nobles secretly rebelled. Power shook daily in anxiety. The king didn't soothe ministers or reform, but turned inward, seeking absolute control his own way. Bengt Algotsson, a young courtier quickly promoted, became rumor center from obscure noble. Bengt got Duke of Finland title, power surging after decrees with no linked feats or merits. That unusual rise stirred the court, but no one dared question. Everyone knew it came from the king's personal favor, because Bengt was too handsome. A beauty even men paused to admire. Inside the palace, Bengt, with emerald eyes and sunny smile, was cut off from outside, his private room door always sealed, welcoming only one, the kingdom's highest, days wielding court power, but nights. Bengt held to bed by cold silver chains, power turning to shackles binding status. Dependence eroded will, turning a courtier into the king's property. Magnus IV increasingly showed mad possession toward Bengt. While outside plots loomed, inside palace, intimate feasts happened often. Courtiers in tight goat hides gathered. Hot wine poured full. Flickering fires reflecting merry faces. Bengt forced to appear in thin clothes, almost see-through. He became symbol of the king's personal power, unwanted attention center, those months. Bengt stood at fame's peak, but appearance withered fast. Body showed violence marks, lashes, bruises, spirit collapsed, eyes empty, any resistance futile before the throne. Magnus IV didn't just want submission, but to crush any leaving chance. Threats at Bengt's family became final binding rope. The king's jealousy escalated when rumors of Bengt's relations with maids reached him. Fear of losing control turned to cruel decision. All Bengt's female attendants, seen as potential threats, eliminated quietly. Those deaths caused no public waves, but enough to spread dread among nobles. The king's favor for Bengt lasted years, but alongside was Magnus IV's reign weakening. When beauty faded, Bengt Algotsson finally lost all power, pushed from court center, like a wrung-out rag. The king lost a male favorite, but secret feasts didn't vanish. When Magnus IV lost the throne in 1364, people looked back at that reign with debates. Outwardly law reforms and unification ambitions, inside a chain of power abuse, possession, and cleverly hidden violence. What happened to Bengt Algotsson recalled as proof of absolute power's dark side, where personal desire swallowed the throne. Number 6. Henry IV of Castile, the Castilian king who abused young male slaves, branded them with royal marks, and wiped out families. Henry IV of Castile was the king holding power in chaotic times, mentioned for manipulating court, keeping the throne 2 decades, controlling nobles with schemes and violence, leaving deep marks in the kingdom's messy phase. Around 1465, when Castile sank in civil war over succession, Toledo Palace loomed like a hot stone block under harsh summer sun. What amid hallways soaked in wine and sweat smells, Henry IV wore a red silk cloak, gold threads glittering with each heavy step. People whispered about the king's impotence with women, a rumor making him furious, boiling like a volcano under the throne's cold stone. But Henry IV couldn't fully quash those rumors, because they were true. He could only vent on weaker ones, voiceless fates. Diego de Valera, a young male slave with bright green eyes incredibly alluring, captured from countryside, became target. He was yanked from dry fields, not understanding why fate turned dark. Toledo then wasn't just power center, but a giant trap, where throne holder could crush anyone. Diego was thrown into palace dungeon with over 10 same-age others. air heavy with mold, rats scrambling in dark, dripping water like counting down final moments. When Henry IV appeared outside those bars, he wasn't the high-throne king, but drunk on power and desire. After careful selection by the king, rough rope tightened Diego's tender body, turning him into absolute property. What followed was hidden under royal power. Diego was bathed, dressed in his life's first decent clothes. He thought selected as king's attendant, couldn't help feeling glad. But joy vanished. Henry IV forced Diego to serve in bed in extreme fear. After satisfaction, the king used a knife to carve royal emblem on his chest, like branding ownership on living flesh. Guttural laughter echoed between cold stone walls, prolonging horror. However, Diego was too young, body exhausted faster than king's expectations, when he couldn't meet sick demands. Henry IV's anger turned more vicious. Power used like a hammer smashing an innocent family. Diego's parents, siblings yanked from village, met tragic ends just for bedroom disappointment of throne sitter, their bodies displayed publicly, exposed to sun and wind with treason charge. Court terrified, nobles silent, because everyone knew a wrong look. Untimely whisper could lead to Diego's family fate. Meanwhile, inside palace, feasts continued, red wine overflowed cups, staining marble floors. Henry IV sat amid male courtiers in revealing clothes, eyes full of affection. Those court banquet gatherings hid shady relations, where desire and power twisted tight. No moral boundaries. Castile under Henry IV chaotic, not just from succession wars, but invisible fear spreading hallways. In reign's final years, Henry IV's image tied to throne shadows. Political achievements overshadowed by rumors and chilling folklore about a homosexual king's cruelty. The king once seen holding royal power amid storms, finally remembered as corruption's symbol, where absolute power opened way for twisted desires and endless brutality. Number 5, Edward II, the English king and his taste for whipping. Lovers with iron rods. Edward II was England's king holding power in tense times, kept the throne against noble pressure, tried maintaining central authority, built strong personal influence, and left clear marks in English royal history. But from 1312, Westminster Castle no longer looked solemn as usual. Air thick like foretelling a storm. On June 18th, Edward II wore a glossy black fur cloak, heavy gold crown on head, walking amid wary courtier eyes. That was a month after his beloved lover, Sir Piers Gaveston, was assassinated by nobles, leaving a big void in the disoriented king's heart. Hugh le Despencer appeared right then. From unnoticed official, Despencer quickly got pulled into Edward II's power and desire vortex just because he was Gaveston's fellow countryman. The king imprisoned Despencer in his private room, where red candles burned all night, light casting on stone walls with two shadows merging. But this relation didn't have simple love colors, stained with violence and replacement obsession. Gaveston dead, Despencer forced into that spot, like filling a cold void. Days after, Edward II vented all frustrations on Despencer's body. He blamed himself for not protecting lover Gaveston from nobles' hand, though massacring 3 suspected noble families just to vent. He still didn't feel better, so all discomfort dumped on Despencer. 25 seconds. Iron rod whipped down, flesh torn, leaving overlapping wounds. The king used violence to bind Despencer tight, seeing it as way to keep new lover from leaving. His fear became catalyst for the high power holder's twisted pleasure. At same time, Westminster Palace gradually turned into stage for sick feasts. Soldiers in half lower body armor, packed tight, metal reflecting red candles, creating stifling scene but seductive in King's eyes. Edward II forced Despenser to serve him in front of dozens of soldiers. Laughter, clinking wine glasses, mixed with Despenser's humiliation. The king's cruelty didn't stop there. Anyone suspected of interfering in his relation with Despenser became punishment target. Rival families got quick trials, ending hanged or quartered before crowds. Dangling bodies on city walls became bloody warnings. Reminding Edward II's power and desire accepted no challenges. Gradually, court sank in fear. Nobles whispered, soldiers eyed each other silently. All political decisions swayed by King's personal obsessions. Pain of losing Gaveston turned motive for brutal action chain. Dragging kingdom into chaos, that madness finally turned back, stabbing the king. Edward II isolated, losing support. Those once bowing to violence started resisting. His death came in humiliating shame, with horrifying anecdote of a red-hot iron rod, closing a reign tied to twisted desires and blind revenge decisions. The once shining throne became prop for decadence, where personal feelings pushed to extreme, leading to tragic end for a dynasty. Number 4. John II of France. The French king who bit and tore at Chancellor Charles in a stone tower. John II of France was the king ruling in fierce war times. Once strengthened royal power, controlled court in unstable phase, tried keeping France from collapse before prolonged war pressure. In 1352, Vincennes Palace by Green Forest didn't look peaceful as seen outside. 100 Years' War cast dark shadows on every stone wall, amid bowstring tense air. John II often appeared in deep blue silk robe embroidered with golden lilies. Majestic demeanor, but eyes always wavering. While armies strained on front lines, this king sought escape from worries through desire. And Charles de la Cerda, trusted courtier, appointed chancellor, was that desire's center. Favor gradually crossed normal love boundaries. In August 1353, John II pulled Charles from court, imprisoned in Vincennes' high stone tower. Door closed. Metal clanged as gold chains locked the courtier's neck, turning grace to shackles. Long nights passed in cold stone tower. King's desire not just possession, under court politics, pressure. John II started liking biting and tearing Charles's flesh till bleeding, leaving marks like ownership claims, pain mixed fear, choked in love's name. Now, Charles no longer courtier, but prisoner in golden cage. John II's favor spread to politics. Anyone seen threatening this relation, or Charles got on purge list. Then, Charles II of Navarre became first name sparking king's rage. To protect lover, John II ordered killing rivals' whole family, turning personal grudge into nation's bloody decision. Under such rule, French court gradually showed dark side. Warriors back from battlefield not only carried war wounds, but became forced entertainers in king's feasts. And their rugged bodies contrasted Charles's slender form. But after all fleeting fun, King returned to Stone Tower, sleeping by his most loved. John II sank deeper into those encounters. Key decisions blurred by jealousy and possession obsession. France faced external dangers, but inside palace, another war quietly waged by the ruler's hand. Chaos spread, setting stage for later tragedies, including King's miserable death in rebellion. Desire no longer private, became seed-destroying court order. John II, from king trying to hold royal power. Gradually seen as mad symbol, swept by jealousy and deviant urges, pushing France into storm vortex. Number 3. Richard I, the Lionheart, the English warrior with love-hate for allies and forcing young soldiers amid crusades. Richard I, dubbed the Lionheart, was England's famed warrior king, leading armies in crusades, building invincible image, making Europe wary through a decade of conquests, from 1187 to 1190, when Europe boiled with plots and wars. Richard I not only prepared for Third Crusade, but nurtured passion for a relation beyond ally limits. At Paris Palace, amid long wine feasts, Richard and Philip II Augustus appeared side by side like twin spears. Philip's silver armor reflected torches. Richard's red cloak embroidered with golden lions swept stone floors lightly, creating majestic image but hiding dark secret. Political alliance gradually warped. Two kings shared not just tables, but beds. Boundary between allies and lovers blurred. 25 seconds. As army moved south, that relation followed to Sicily camps. Command tent only one, and only needed one. Night fell, red candlelight through thin fabric. Shadowing two commanders discussing war on bed, Richard grew bolder, even daring pull Philip to private tent midday. Away from weapon clangs and horse whinnies, warrior king's desire carried battlefield roughness. Philip's blue silk torn, exposing sweaty, rugged body. Once, Richard lightly slashed Philip's shoulder with dagger, leaving mark like possession claim. Their intimacy gradually lost gentleness, heavy with control and threats. Alongside that, Richard dragged others into desire vortex. Blondel, youthful courtier with potential. King nurtured in long Sicily nights. Their relation like mentor-student, till once. Blondel forced to indulge Richard's urges, becoming outlet when Philip absent. 4 seconds. Blondel's presence ignited fierce jealousy in Philip. In rage, Philip ordered Blondel executed mid-camp, turning personal hatred to death sentence, leaving fear spreading fast among troops. Blondel's tragic end didn't make Richard guilty. When Philip absent, Richard recruited more young French soldiers, bringing them to close units, days warriors, nights battlefield lovers, satisfying king's desires amid long waits for Philip. Those years, Lionheart image split. One side brave king on battlefield, other desire-dominated, using power to impose urges. Richard never guessed those tangled relations would sow hatred seeds, cracking alliance and deepening betrayal roots. When Richard left Sicily for continued crusade, he carried not just famed glory, but rumors of sexuality and treason. Intimate secret moments only they knew, used by Philip as sharp daggers stabbing back at lover. Battlefield lions still roared at enemies, but behind roar was decadence, leaving dark mark in history. Number 2. Mubarak al-Saklabi, the Valencia power holder who tortured lovers and buried rival families alive. Mubarak al-Saklabi was once co-ruler of Valencia in chaotic post-Cordoba Caliphate phase, controlling huge finances, keeping tax collection, manipulating court, building force from slave status to power peak. From about 1012 to 1017, Valencia, not only chaotic from Fitna al-Andalus, but sank in discreet but cruel desire vortex of the king. Palace by Turia River, still fake, peaceful. Lush orange gardens, calm lotus ponds, light herb scents. But behind harmonious scenery was power warped by out-of-control urges. When Mubarak al-Saqlabi appeared wearing a magnificent white silk cloak, embroidered with gold, exuding the dignified bearing of the Amirid elite, few suspected that he had once been a Saqlabi slave, bought and sold as mere property. Together with Muzaffar, he later carried out a coup and took control of Valencia. The two men shared everything: the immense treasury that yielded over 100,000 dinars each month, the palaces, and the inner circles of power. Their alliance, born from shared adversity, gradually turned into a deeply interdependent and intensely possessive relationship. In the stillness of late palace nights, Mubarak frequently asserted strong control. He would bring Muzaffar to a private chamber filled with heavy incense smoke and cushioned with layers of silk pillows. Sometimes he used slender silver cords to secure Muzaffar's wrists to the elaborately carved bedposts. Their bond was increasingly strained by Mubarak's consuming jealousy and constant fear of losing dominance. He sought to reinforce his authority in moments of insecurity, ever anxious about the fragile equilibrium that sustained their joint rule. The corruption spread further. Mubarak began directing his need for control toward those in weaker positions. In August 1016, Zaid, a young garden servant, 15 years old, purchased from the Baghdad market, became the next person caught in his pattern of overreach and abuse of power. In secret night feasts, amid male courtiers in thin silk, Zaid forced to strip and dance, turning tender body into power display game. Lute sounds, poetry praising affections rang, covering disgust and fear in Zaid's eyes. Tragedy hit when Zaid accidentally touched Muzaffar, just small move enough to spark Mubrak's fierce jealousy. Power used like sharp cold blade. Zaid's family, Slav slave group in suburbs, dragged night and buried alive as warning. Their death's clear message on ownership and king's obsession. Valencia court then had unwritten flattery law. Men in wide neck robes, reciting poetry praising two co-rulers' equal homosexual love, seeing as new power symbol, but behind verses. Once equal brotherhood warped, pushing Valencia into fear state. Later, relation between Mubrak and Muzaffar gnawed by suspicion. Desire once bonding, now source of division. When blind jealousy led to more bed violence. Valencia under Mubrak no longer peaceful city by Turia, but saw a power symbol, where personal urges fed by blood and tears. Finally, when endurance hit limit, Muzaffar staged horsefall accident, sending Mubrak to other world. Number 1. Muzaffar al-Saqlabi, co-ruler, mutual with Mubrak, quartered slave families in jealousy. Muzaffar al-Saqlabi was one of two holding power in post-Cordoba Valencia, once controlled tax machinery, kept city stable amid Fitna al-Andalus chaos, rose from slave to power peak. From about 1012 to 1017, Valencia lived in long, warm nights, bright moon covering winding city canals. Few knew under peaceful look. Power torn by mad relation between Muzaffar and Mubrak al-Saqlabi. Two once slaves, managed water channels together, bought-sold like goods, when grasping power. They lived like husband-wife, sharing court and treasury. Muzaffar often appeared in deep green silk cloak, embroidered silver glittering. Quiet demeanor hid torn inner. His desires not always gentle, many times before bed. Muzaffar liked whipping Mubrak's body with soft Andalus goat leather lash. Feeling of dominating power and pleasure blended. Relation between two mutual, but increasingly deviant. Both needed each other for throne. Feared losing from jealousy, but didn't want others surpassing in power balance. That torn feeling made any gaze at Mubrak seen as threat. One late May 1015 day. Male courtier Hamid, usual wine server in night feasts, accidentally laughed too intimately with Mubrak. Just that small moment enough to ignite rage. Mu'afar used power to vent jealous anger. Hamid's family captured, brought to Valencia market, quartered publicly. From then, fear spread wide. In palace, male courtiers learned flattery, wearing tight silk pants, then gathering, discussing poetry praising two kings' equal homosexual love, creating glamorous veil for brutal reality. Under sweet verses was long purge and revenge chain against anyone making two kings feel threatened. Valencia ruled by fear. By 1017, co-rulers' relation rotted. Jealousy turned suspicion. Suspicion led mutual scheming. Shared power became burden. Whole city held breath for end. In 1018, Mubrak died in horse accident, leaving instant power void. But that made Mu'afar lose support. Overthrown soon after. Once praised love collapsed with short reign. Valencia stepped from obsession, leaving dark memory of era power driven by desire and jealousy, where two shared fate ones pulled each other to tragic bottom. You see, monarchs are often seen as symbols of order, morality, and rules. But behind that glamour exist corners making history warped and grim. Secrets buried centuries now uncovered, reminding us history was never clean or straight as books told. What do you think about the truths I just exposed? Leave your thoughts in comments, because each view helps complete the layered, conflicting history picture. If interested in other hidden palace tales, controversial issues, and corners few dare mention, don't forget subscribe channel and turn on notifications to join us on truth-seeking path. Your support motivates us to keep digging into dark history pages, where deep secrets wait to be illuminated.